Thank you for joining me in our analysis and view of one of the most remarkable women in the Middle Ages, Eleanor of Aquitaine. She is such an amazing woman who broke all the rules and all the expectations of women during that time. So we are going to be talking about her and trying to see how significant she was. She is defined as the liberated woman of the Middle Ages. Eleanor was born in France, in this southwest region of France, and she grew up. She spent her first 15 years in that region, in the region that is called Aquitaine. So if you see, this is a very big region that her father was the Duke of Aquitaine and the Duke of Poitou. But if you notice, see how huge this region is and how small the land that the King of France was actually ruling. So the Duke of Aquitaine was way more powerful than the King of France or than any other Duke or Count in France. And Eleanor, at the age of 5, was already the heiress of this land. Therefore, her father, knowing that, tried to make arrangements since very early with the King of France to marry Eleanor to the heir to the King of France, Louis VI. The heir to the King of France was Philip. Philip was a very down-to-earth boy. He was growing to be a knight, and he was perfect to become the next King of France. And as Eleanor was growing up and she became a teenager, she was excited with the idea that she was going to marry Philip. She liked Philip, and Eleanor was, since very early in her life, very precocious. Not only she was educated, very educated, culturally speaking, she spoke many languages, and she was also very assertive, very sure of herself. She knew exactly what she wanted, and her father had told her that she would be able to do anything that she wanted. So, being the heiress of all this land and having the personality that she had, Eleanor knew that she would have a very happy life with Philip. But when Philip was one day riding his horse got scared by some wild pigs that crossed its path, and Philip fell off the horse and died. And that was a big problem because the heir to the throne was dead. Now, in the meantime, Eleanor is still enjoying her life here, something that her father and grandfather had created in Aquitaine was an environment in which people not only were interested in cultural issues, music, plays, literature, they were the patrons, both her father and grandfather were the patrons of all kinds of culture, but also her father created an atmosphere of fun. Let's enjoy life, let's have fun. And if some of the rules that the church or society established, it was okay. The fun thing in life is what counts. And Eleanor grew up like that. Eleanor was a free spirit woman. So when she found out that Philip was dead, she was devastated because she was anxious to get married. Even when she was only 12, 13, 14, she was anxious. But the King of France had a second son. His name was Louis. But Louis, who lived here, had always been living in a monastery because he was supposed to become a monk. But now his father said, come back because you are going to be the King of France when I die, and you are going to marry Eleanor. Eleanor was not happy, but her father had just died, and the King of France said, you need to come and you need to marry my son, Louis. Eleanor was not happy at all, but she did. So here we have Eleanor marrying Louis, and Eleanor at age 15 became the Queen of France. She was not happy, the marriage was not working out. Eleanor kept saying, I never meant to marry a monk. Eleanor was into fun, sex, having just as many pleasures as she could, and just enjoying life. And Louis was into praying, fulfilling his duties, but never following Eleanor in all her interests. Until one day, Louis comes to Eleanor and says, you know, the Pope and Bernard of Clairvaux want me to go on a crusade. It seems that the Muslims have conquered the city of Edessa, and the Pope wants Christians to recover that city. So, what do you think? Eleanor opened her big eyes and said, sounds perfect. And Louis said, really? And she said, yes, sounds perfect, and I want to go. So, something totally unique, Eleanor decided to go on the crusade, and with some of her ladies in waiting. So she sent her troops, her own troops, because remember, she's the heiress of Aquitaine and she has her own vassals. So she sent her vassals, and the King of France left by sea. So here we have the King of France leaving, and Eleanor left riding her horse with her about 300 of her ladies. The crusade was a disaster. The soldiers, the knights, blamed Eleanor for the failure. Eleanor and Louis are not happy with each other. They actually are very angry at each other. Rumor says that Eleanor had an affair while she was there with her uncle who lived in the Holy Land. Eleanor was really ready to leave Louis, and so she went to talk to the Pope, and the Pope said, no. You have to be a good wife, go back to your husband, and give your husband a son, which he really needs, and just stay there. So that's what Eleanor did, and obeying the Pope, and she even had a couple of children, except they were 2 daughters. But she tried. The marriage still didn't work. So Eleanor went back to the Pope and finally convinced Bernard of Clairvaux and the Pope that the marriage was not working and the marriage should be annulled. As soon as the marriage was annulled, Eleanor left, and her 2 daughters stayed with her husband, with Louis, and 2 months after the annulment, Eleanor had married the future King of England, Henry, and a few weeks later, the King of England died, and Henry became Henry II of England, and Eleanor becomes the Queen of England. She was like 10 years at least older than Henry, but Henry was totally in love with her, or maybe in lust with her. But the marriage at the beginning functioned very well, but Eleanor was very assertive, and Eleanor knew what she wanted. So she was the Queen of England, Henry was the King of England, but Eleanor set the limits and said, look, I'm your wife, you are going to be faithful to me just like I am going to be faithful to you. But I'm not going to put up with any infidelity. But I'm going to fulfill my obligations as a wife. And she did. And she even had many children, 8 children in total. But the marriage began to have problems when she found out that Henry was actually having mistresses. And rumors say that, in fact, Eleanor had something to do with the death of one of Henry's mistresses. But after a while, Eleanor said, I told you that I was not going to put up with that. I am not ready to stay here, so I am going to leave and go back to Aquitaine. And so she did. While she was there, she was involved in cultural life and also political life. As far as cultural life, she is known as the founder of what is called the Court of Love. Basically, she established a court in which young men and women would come and they would be able to live what is called the courtly love and follow certain rules, but just enjoy love. And at the same time, she was the patron of the minstrels that came to sing to the ladies, and the troubadours, and a new genre of literature was created because these troubadours wrote songs, romantic songs, for the ladies. Many of the ladies were already married, so these troubadours were singing sad songs because they could not have those women who were already married. And Eleanor was promoting this outside of marriage love. But they did have a great deal of fun. And at the same time, she's involved in politics, and she even supports the revolt of one of her sons, or 2 of her sons, against their father, her own husband. And finally, Henry, who had been patient, said, that's it. I am not going to put up with this woman anymore. So if she's going to keep supporting the revolt of my sons, I am going to put her in prison. And he did. So some soldiers came to Poitiers, where she lived, and arrested her and took her to a faraway castle where she stayed, and she lived there. Of course, she had all the amenities that she could have, but she was in prison for the rest of Henry's life. But she was allowed to come out of prison sometimes during Christmas time to spend family time with her children and her husband. But she was there until Henry died. And then when Henry died, she got out and continued to be involved in politics. When Henry died, her son, Richard the Lionhearted, became the king, and since he spent most of his time away from England, Eleanor played the role of regent, even though officially King John was the regent, but Eleanor is the one that took care of everything. And then when Richard died, she was also involved in politics during the time of King John, and she continued to be involved in politics until close to age of 80. She was too old, too tired, and she chose a monastery to go and live there. And so her last years in her life she spent in a monastery. But by then she had established a very important model for women, that they could be free, that they could be assertive, they could be involved in anything they wanted, in education, in politics, in culture, in anything that they felt like doing, in traveling, of course. And in the monastery, she spent the last years of her life. And when she died, she was buried there. Soon before she died, when she was there and she was old, she wrote letters to the Pope or to other people. And one of her interesting quotes is this that I wanted to leave you with. She wrote, "Pitiful and pitied by no one, why have I come to the ignominy of this detestable old age? Me, who was ruler of 2 kingdoms and mother of 2 kings." And so she's buried there, and this is her tomb at the monastery of Font-de-Vrault. And this is the end of our look into the life of Eleanor. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would like very much to know what you think of Eleanor. If you think Eleanor would be a role model for yourself or for your daughter.